The orphan pulled a native girl from the river. The next day, 100 warriors gave him a family. 7-year-old Eli Thompson had been living alone by the river for 2 years. Most people would call that impossible. A child couldn't survive on his own, hunting small game, building shelter, avoiding danger. Yet here he was, small hands steady as he pulled 12-year-old Ayanna from the rushing water, her body limp and lifeless in his tiny arms. The current had caught Ayanna while she was collecting water in clay pots. Eli had been checking the fish traps he'd learned to build when he heard her scream. Without thinking, he dove in. Even though the water was deeper than he was tall, his small size actually helped. He could move faster through the water than a grown man. When he dragged Ayanna to shore, she wasn't breathing. Eli had seen the trading. Post-doctor do this once before, so he pushed on her chest the way he remembered, then breathed air into her lungs. It took several tries before she coughed up the river water. As Ayanna gasped and blinked up at him, her eyes went wide with something that looked like recognition. But that was impossible. They'd never met before. "You're so small," she whispered in broken English, reaching up to touch his face with trembling fingers. "But you have the mark." Eli pulled back, suddenly shy. He didn't like people looking at the 3 pale scars on his shoulder. The woman at the trading post had said they were ugly, that they made him look damaged. That's why nobody wanted to adopt him when the post closed down. "I should take you home," Eli said quietly. "Your family will be worried." But Ayanna was sitting up now, studying him with intense curiosity. "What is your name, little one?" "Eli." "Eli. Thompson, Thompson," she repeated slowly. "That is not your real name." Before Eli could ask what she meant, Ayanna was standing up, water still dripping from her traditional dress. "You live alone here?" Eli nodded toward his small shelter hidden among the trees. It wasn't much, just branches and mud woven together to keep out the rain, but it was warm and dry. "For how long?" "2 winters," Eli said, holding up 2 small fingers. Since the trading post closed and everyone left, Ayanna's expression grew sad and serious. No child should live alone. It is not the way of people who care for each other. "Nobody cares for me," Eli said matter-of-factly. He'd accepted this truth long ago. "I take care of myself." "That will change tomorrow," Ayanna said with surprising certainty. "My father will come at dawn. He has been looking for you for a very long time." "Looking for me?" Eli's heart jumped with hope, then settled back into familiar disappointment. "Nobody looks for me. You're confused." But Ayanna was already walking toward the tree line, turning back only to say, "Get some rest, little warrior. Tomorrow, your real life begins." As Eli watched her disappear into the forest, he touched the scars on his shoulder again. In his small heart, something he'd buried deep began to stir, something that felt dangerously like hope. What if she was right? What if someone really was looking for him? But hope was dangerous for a 7-year-old living alone. Hope could break his heart all over again. Eli woke when he heard the horses. At first he thought he was dreaming. He'd learned to sleep lightly during his 2 years alone, but this sounded like thunder rolling across the earth. He crept to the edge of his shelter and peered through the morning mist. His small body froze with fear. They were everywhere. Men on horses lined the ridge above. His camp, more than he'd ever seen in one place. Their silhouettes looked enormous against the pale sky, and even from a distance he could see weapons, war paint, and the careful spacing of warriors ready for battle. Eli's 7-year-old mind raced with panic. Had he done something wrong by saving Ayanna? Were they here to punish him? He was just a little boy. Surely they wouldn't hurt him for helping someone. He was backing toward his escape route through the reeds when a gentle voice spoke behind him. "Do not be afraid, little one." Eli spun around to find a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair standing near his shelter. The man had approached, completely silently the way Eli moved when he was hunting rabbits. But this man wasn't hunting. He was smiling. "You are Eli," the man said, kneeling down so they were the same height. "I am Chief Dakota. Ayanna is my daughter. I didn't hurt her," Eli said quickly, his voice small and frightened. "I saved her from drowning. I promise I didn't do anything bad." Takakota's expression grew even gentler. "I know, child. That is exactly why we are here." He gestured toward the ridge where all the warriors waited. "They came to honor you, to thank the brave little boy who saved one of our most precious children." Eli's fear began to mix with confusion. "Honor me, but I'm nobody important. That is where you are wrong." Takakota studied Eli's face carefully. "May I see your shoulder, little warrior?" Eli hesitated. The scars always made adults uncomfortable, but something in Takakota's voice made him feel safe, so he pulled his worn shirt aside to reveal the 3 pale lines. Takakota's breath caught. He spoke rapidly to another man who had appeared beside him, a warrior with weathered skin and gentle eyes. "This is Ka, my brother," Takakota explained. "He was there the night you received those marks." "I don't remember getting them," Eli said. "Honestly, the lady at the trading post said they were from an accident when I was very small." Ka knelt down beside Takakota and spoke in careful English. "Not accident, little one. Those marks were made with love by someone who wanted you to be part of our family." Eli's young heart began to pound. Family? The word he dreamed about for 2 lonely years. "My family," he whispered. "We believe so," Takakota said gently. 20 years ago, my youngest brother found a small boy during a harsh winter. The child was nearly dead from cold and hunger. With no memory of where he came from, my brother began the process of making you his son. But before it could be completed— "What happened?" Eli asked, though part of him was afraid to know. "You disappeared, taken in the night by men who steal children to sell to settlements far away." Takakota's voice grew heavy with old pain. "My brother spent the rest of his life searching for you." Eli felt tears gathering in his eyes. Someone had searched for him. Someone had wanted him. "Is he here?" Eli asked hopefully. "Can I meet him?" Takakota's expression grew sad. "He died 3 winters ago still looking for you, but he never stopped believing you would come home." As Eli tried to process this overwhelming information, Takakota reached into his leather bag and pulled out something small and wooden. It was a horse carved with exquisite detail, worn smooth by small hands. "This was your favorite toy," Takakota said, placing it in Eli's palm. "My brother carved it for you just days before you were taken." Eli stared at the wooden horse, and deep in his mind, something stirred. Not quite a memory, but a feeling. A sense of safety and love that he couldn't quite grasp, but somehow recognized. "What happens now?" he asked in his small voice. "Now," Takakota said with a warm smile, "you choose. You can stay here by the river, living alone as you have, or you can come home with us and let us love you the way a child deserves to be loved." Eli looked up at the 100 warriors on the ridge, no longer seeing them as frightening strangers, but as protectors who had come to bring him home. For the first time in 2 years, Eli felt like maybe, just maybe, he might finally belong somewhere. But as sleep took him, one small worry remained in the back of his mind. What if the other children in the tribe didn't want a strange little boy who'd lived alone by the river? What if they thought he was too different to fit in? The wooden horse in his hand seemed to whisper that everything would be all right. But even at 7 years old, Eli knew that wanting something to be true didn't always make it so. When they crested the final hill, Eli gasped. The tribal settlement spread out below them like nothing he'd ever imagined. Dozens of well-built homes, arranged in careful patterns, smoke rising from cooking fires, gardens full of growing plants, and corral containing more horses than he could count. But what amazed him most were the people. So many people, all living together, all belonging to each other. Children ran between the houses, playing games he'd never seen. Women worked together, preparing food, their voices mixing with laughter. Men tended tools and weapons, talking in small groups. It was everything his lonely heart had dreamed of during those cold nights by the river. "It's so big," he whispered to Ayana. "Wait until you see the inside," she replied with a smile. As their horses descended toward the settlement, people began to emerge from their homes. Word of their arrival had traveled ahead, and soon a crowd was gathering. But instead of the curious stares Eli had expected, he saw something different in their faces. Joy, relief, welcome. An elderly woman with white hair and gentle eyes pushed through the crowd and approached Eli as Ayana helped Eli down from the horse. The woman spoke rapidly to Takakota in their language, gesturing toward Eli with obvious excitement. She says, "You look just like your father did as a child," Takakota translated, kneeling beside Eli. "She was there when he found you the first time." "She remembers me?" Eli asked in wonder. The old woman nodded vigorously and spoke again. This time her words brought tears to Dakota's eyes. "She says she never stopped believing you would come home. She kept a place set for you at every meal for 20 years. The idea that someone had been thinking about him, saving a place for him, made Eli's chest feel tight with emotions he couldn't name. But before he could respond, 3 children appeared at the edge of the crowd. 2 boys who looked about 10 and 12, and a girl who seemed close to his own age. The youngest boy stepped forward first, his dark eyes curious but friendly. "Are you really the lost one?" he asked in careful English. Eli nodded shyly. "I'm Takakota," the boy said proudly. "I'm named after our chief. This is my brother Koa and my sister Ayana. But there's already an Ayana," Eli said confused. The girl giggled. "Names can be shared. It means we're all part of the same family. We've been waiting to meet you forever," the older boy added. "Our grandfather told us stories about the little boy who was taken. He said you were very brave, even when you were small." "I don't feel very brave," Eli admitted quietly. "That's what makes you brave." Little Ayana said seriously, being scared, but doing the right thing anyway. As the crowd began to disperse, Takakota placed a gentle hand on Eli's shoulder. "Are you ready to see your new home?" Eli nodded, though his stomach was full of butterflies. They led him to a comfortable lodge near the center of the settlement. Inside, it was warm and welcoming with soft furs on the floor and beautiful decorations on the walls. But what caught Eli's attention was a small bed in the corner, obviously built for a child. "We prepared this for you," Dakota explained. "In case you decided to stay." "You built me a bed?" Eli asked, his voice small with wonder. "We built you a whole room," Koa said warmly. "A place that will always be yours no matter what." That evening, as the settlement settled into its nighttime rhythms, Eli sat outside his new home, watching the stars. The sounds were so different from his river camp. Children laughing, adults talking, the comfortable noise of a community at peace. Little Ayana appeared beside him, carrying a clay bowl. "Are you sad?" she asked, settling down next to him. "Not sad," Eli said thoughtfully, "just different. I've never been around so many people before." "It will take time," she said wisely, offering him the bowl. It contained stew that smelled better than anything he'd ever tasted, but will help you learn. That's what families do. As Eli ate the warm stew and listened to the gentle sounds of his new home, he felt something growing in his chest. Not quite happiness yet, but hope. Real solid hope. But even as comfort settled around him like a warm blanket, one question remained in his young mind. Would he be able to become the person these kind people believed him to be? Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new chances to prove he belonged here. For now, it was enough to know that someone had built him a bed and saved him a place at their table for 20 years. Finally, he was home. Eli's first week in the settlement brought wonders he'd never imagined. Every morning, children would appear at his lodge, eager to include him in their games and activities. They taught him to weave grass into rope, to identify which plants were good for medicine, and to speak simple words in their language. But it also brought challenges that made his small heart ache with worry. The problem started on his fourth day when the children were playing a game that involved throwing small stones at targets. Eli had spent 2 years learning to hit rabbits and birds with stones to survive. So when his turn came, he hit the center target perfectly. Then he hit it. Again and again. "How did you learn to do that?" asked Dakota the younger, his voice filled with admiration. "I had to eat," Eli said simply, not understanding why everyone had gone quiet. An older boy named Nikon stepped forward, his expression unfriendly. "Show off," he muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not showing off," Eli protested. "You asked me to play." "Nobody's that good at throwing stones," Nan said louder. "You're just trying to make us look stupid." Little Ayanna moved protectively next to Eli. "He's not trying to make anyone look stupid. He's just good at it." "Yeah, because he's weird," Nikon shot back. "What kind of 7-year-old lives alone in the woods for 2 years? Normal children can't do that." The words hit Eli like physical blows. He'd been afraid of this, that the other children would think he was strange, that they wouldn't want to be his friend because he was different. "I'm not weird," Eli said quietly, but his voice shook with hurt. "Then why don't you know how to play any normal games? Why do you flinch every time someone makes a loud noise? Why do you hoard food in your pockets like an animal?" Eli's cheeks burned with shame. He had been keeping extra food in his clothes. It was a habit from living alone when he never knew where his next meal would come from. He thought no one had noticed. "That's enough, Nikon," young Takakota said firmly. But the damage was done. Eli ran away from the group, tears streaming down his face. He found a quiet spot behind the horse corrals and curled up against a fence post, trying to make himself as small as possible. Maybe Nan was right. Maybe he was too weird, too damaged from living alone to fit in with normal children. Maybe wanting a family wasn't enough if he didn't know how to be part of one. He was still crying when gentle footsteps approached. Old grandmother Ayanna, the one who had kept a place for him at meals, lowered herself carefully to sit beside him. "Little one," she said in broken English, her voice warm and kind, "why do you hide your tears?" "I don't belong here," Eli whispered. "I'm too different. I don't know how to be like the other children." Grandmother Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, watching the horses in the corral. Then she spoke in her own language, words Eli was beginning to understand. "She says," came Ayanna's voice from behind them, "that a horse raised by wolves would be different from horses raised in the herd, but it would still be a horse, and it might know things the other horses needed to learn." Eli turned to see Ayanna approaching, followed by several other children, including little Takakota and the other young Ayanna. "We came to apologize for Nikon." Little Takakota said, "He's angry because his father went on the search for you and got hurt. But that doesn't make it right for him to hurt you." "We don't think you're weird," young Ayanna added. "We think you're amazing. You can do things we can't do because you had to learn to survive. Will you teach us?" little Takakota asked. "Hopefully. How to make fish traps, how to find food in the wild, how to be brave when you're scared." Eli wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "You really want to learn?" "Of course we do," Ayanna said with a smile. "You're our brother now. Brothers teach each other." As the children settled around him, asking eager questions about his life by the river, Eli felt something warm bloom in his chest. Maybe being different didn't mean he didn't belong. Maybe it meant he had special things to offer. But even as he began to feel hopeful again, he wondered, would there always be people like Nikon who saw his differences as flaws? And would he be strong enough to prove them wrong? The opportunity to prove himself came sooner than Eli expected. On his 10th day in the settlement, little Ayana burst into his lodge just after dawn, her face streaked with tears. "Eli, you have to help," she cried. "My cousin Takakota and 2 other boys went exploring in the canyon yesterday and they never came back." Eli sat up quickly in his bed. "How long have they been gone?" "Since yesterday morning. The adults have been searching all night, but the canyon is huge and there are so many places to hide. They're afraid the boys are hurt or lost." Eli's mind immediately shifted into the survival mode that had kept him alive for 2 years. Lost children, dangerous terrain, limited time. He'd been in situations like this before, though always as the one who was lost. "I can help find them," he said, jumping out of bed and reaching for his clothes. "Really? But you're just 7. The grown-ups with all their experience couldn't find them. That's why I might be able to," Eli explained, pulling on his boots. "I think like a scared child, not like an adult. When you're lost and frightened, you don't do what adults expect you to do." They ran through the settlement to where Chief Dakota and a dozen other adults were preparing for another search. Eli approached the chief nervously, but with determination. "I want to help look for the boys," he said in his small but steady voice. Takakota looked down at him with weary eyes. "Little one, we have been searching since dark. This canyon is dangerous, and you are still learning our lands. But I know about being lost," Eli insisted. "When I lived alone, I got lost many times. I know where scared children hide." Koa, who was preparing to join the search party, knelt beside Eli. "What would you do differently, little warrior?" Eli closed his eyes and thought back to the terrifying times when he'd been lost in unfamiliar country. Adults look for signs on the ground, footprints, and broken branches. But when you're really scared, you don't think about leaving tracks. You just want to feel safe. "So where do children go to feel safe?" Koa asked, genuinely curious. "Up," Eli said immediately. "Not down, into caves or ravines like adults might think. Up, where you can see everything and nothing can sneak up on you. High rocks, tall trees, anywhere that feels protected but gives you a view." Chief Dakota exchanged glances with the other adults. "The boy has a point. We've been searching the canyon floor and the caves." And Eli continued, gaining confidence. They would stay together. Adults might split up to cover more ground, but scared children stick together no matter what. Within minutes, Eli found himself riding double with Koa toward the canyon, part of a search party that was now looking up instead of down. As they reached the rocky terrain, Eli studied the landscape with eyes trained by necessity to find shelter and safety. "There," he said suddenly, pointing to a narrow ledge high on the canyon wall. "That shelf of rock, it's protected from wind, has water seeping from the stone, and you can see the whole valley from there." "I can't see anything," Koa said, squinting upward. "There," Eli pointed more precisely, a flash of blue cloth behind that boulder. The adults called out, and faint voices answered from the ledge. The 3 missing boys appeared, dirty and frightened, but unharmed. They'd climbed up when they got lost, found the protected shelter, and been too scared to climb back down the treacherous path. As the rescue party carefully helped the boys down with ropes and gentle encouragement, Chief Takakota placed his hand on Eli's shoulder. "Without your help, we might have searched for days in the wrong places," he said with deep respect. "You saved those boys by thinking like a child instead of an adult." When they returned to the settlement, word of Eli's role in the rescue had already spread. Even Nan approached him looking ashamed of his earlier cruelty. I was wrong about you, the older boy said quietly. You're not weird. You're special in a good way. That evening, as Eli sat with his new family around their evening meal, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Not just belonging, but the knowledge that he had something valuable to offer. His differences weren't flaws to be hidden. They were gifts that could help others. But even as warmth and acceptance surrounded him, Eli sensed that bigger challenges lay ahead. Growing up meant more than just finding where you belong. It meant proving again and again that you deserve to stay. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new opportunities to show that the lost child had truly found his home. 3 weeks had passed since Eli's arrival, and life in the settlement had begun to feel natural. He woke each morning to the sound of children playing, ate meals surrounded by people who cared about him, and fell asleep knowing he was safe and wanted. But on this particular morning, Chief Takakota approached him with a serious expression. "Little one, I need to speak with you about something important," Takakota said, settling beside Eli near the morning fire. "In our tribe, when someone joins our family, there is a ceremony, a way of making the bond official and permanent." Eli's heart jumped with excitement and nervousness. "A ceremony for me? Yes. But before we can hold it, I need to be certain that this is truly what you want. Once you become my adopted son officially, there will be no going back. You will belong to us completely, and we will belong to you." The words should have filled Eli with pure joy, but instead they stirred up feelings he thought he'd buried. What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not good enough to be your real son? Takakota's expression grew tender. What makes you think you might not be good enough? Eli stared at his small hands. I lived like an animal for 2 years. I don't know how to be civilized like other children. Sometimes I still wake up at night thinking I'm back at the river alone. And what do you think when you realize you're here with us? I feel grateful, but also scared. Scared that it's too good to be true. Dakota was quiet for a long moment, watching the morning activities around them. Children laughed as they played. Women worked together preparing food. Men shared stories as they crafted tools. Eli, Takakota said finally, do you see Koa's son playing with the others? Eli nodded, watching a boy about his age throwing a ball made of woven grass. He was born here, raised with every comfort and advantage. Yet yesterday, when those children were lost in the canyon, he froze with fear. He could not think what to do. Takakota placed a gentle hand on Eli's shoulder. But you, a 7-year-old who lived alone in the wilderness, saved them with your courage and wisdom. But I still don't know all your customs. I still make mistakes with your language. You still have the heart of a protector, Takakota interrupted gently. You still put others before yourself. You still show kindness to those who were unkind to you. These are the qualities that make a good son, not perfect manners or flawless speech. That afternoon, Eli found himself walking alone to the edge of the settlement, looking back toward the mountains where his old life lay hidden. Part of him wondered what would happen if he simply walked away. Would they chase him? Would they let him go? Would he survive another winter alone by the river? But as he stood there, little Ayana appeared beside him. Are you leaving? She asked quietly, slipping her small hand into his. I don't know, Eli admitted. I'm scared of the ceremony. What if I promise to be your brother and then I fail? You already are my brother, she said simply. The ceremony doesn't make you family. It just tells everyone what's already true. But what if I'm not brave enough? What if I'm not smart enough? What if? Eli, she interrupted, her 7-year-old voice surprisingly wise. You saved me from drowning. You found the lost boys when all the adults couldn't. You made friends with children who didn't trust you at first. If that's not brave and smart enough, then I don't know what is. as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Eli made his choice, not because he felt ready or worthy, but because he'd learned something important during his weeks with the tribe. Families weren't about being perfect. They were about choosing to belong to each other, flaws and all. That evening, he found Chief Dakota and looked up into the man's kind eyes. "I want the ceremony," Eli said with quiet determination. "I want to be your son, really and truly." Takakota smiled, and Eli saw tears of joy gathering in the corners of the chief's eyes. "Then tomorrow, little warrior, you will officially become what you have always been in our hearts, family." The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright. Eli woke to find new clothes laid out for him, a beautiful shirt decorated with intricate beadwork and soft leather pants that fit him perfectly. As he dressed, his hands only shook a little. The entire settlement had gathered in the central area around a carefully built fire. Eli had never seen so many people in one place, all there for him. The thought was overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. Chief Dakota appeared at his lodge wearing his finest ceremonial clothing. "Are you ready, my son?" The word son still made Eli's heart flutter with joy. "Yes, father." As they walked toward the gathering, Eli noticed that every person they passed smiled at him with genuine warmth. Children who had become his friends waved excitedly. Adults who had watched him grow over the past weeks nodded with approval. Even Nikon, who had once called him weird, gave him an encouraging thumbs up. The ceremony itself was simpler and more beautiful than Eli had expected. The tribe elders spoke in their ancient language about family, belonging, and the bonds that hold communities together. Chief Dakota placed his hands on Eli's shoulders and spoke words that needed no translation: love, protection, and permanent belonging. When Grandmother Ayana stepped forward with a small clay bowl, Eli expected something mysterious or frightening. Instead, she dipped her finger in what appeared to be simple clay mixed with water and painted a small symbol on his forehead. "This is the mark of our family," Takakota explained softly. "It will wash away with water, but what it represents will last forever." The most meaningful moment came when each child in the tribe approached to welcome him officially as their brother. Little Ayana hugged him tightly and whispered, "Now it's official. You're stuck with us forever." Little Takakota grinned and said, "Can you teach us more survival tricks now that you're really our brother?" Even the older children, who had once been wary of the strange boy from the river, now accepted him completely. They had seen his courage, his kindness, and his willingness to help others. They knew he belonged. As the ceremony concluded with a feast that included all of Eli's favorite foods, he found himself sitting between Takakota and Ayana the Elder, surrounded by more family than he had ever dreamed possible. "Are you happy, little one?" Grandmother Ayana asked, offering him a piece of honey cake. Eli looked around at the faces surrounding him, his father, his sister, his brothers, his extended family of aunts, uncles, and cousins who would love him and protect him for the rest of his life. "I'm more than happy," he said, his 7-year-old voice strong and certain. "I'm home." 6 months later, Eli could speak the tribal language fluently, had taught half the children in the settlement how to build fish traps, and had grown 2 inches taller from eating regular nutritious meals. But the most important change couldn't be measured in inches or words learned. The frightened, lonely boy who had lived by the river was gone forever. In his place was a confident, loved child who knew exactly where he belonged and who he was. Eli, son of Chief Dakota, brother to many, protector of those in need, and valued member of a family that would never let him face the world alone again. When visiting traders asked about the small boy who seemed to have such an important place in the tribe, the people would smile and tell them the truth. "This is our son who was lost and now is found. He saved one of our children, and in return, we all became his family." Eli's old shelter by the river had long since been reclaimed by the wilderness, but it didn't matter. He had found something infinitely better than survival. He had found love, purpose, and a place where his differences were celebrated rather than scorned. The lost child had finally come home, and he would never be lost again. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable story where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.